but not for the visuals, just so we've got a backup of the sound. So, is everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
Born ready.
I think so.
I've already forgotten the order.
You're last.
You're last.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so you're listening to Who Review Extra, and for the next hour or so, we're going to be talking about the 30th anniversary of the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who, so you don't have to. Hi, I'm Dylan.
I'm Ian.
I'm John.
And I'm Matt.
Excellent. Well, there we go. Matt, smash that. Smash that.
Yes, oddly, Mark's audio cut out, so I didn't hear him say.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. Just for me, so I genuinely got a bit confused.
So
but fortunately, I can lip read despite the broad Scottish accent, so I just,
I have the subtitles on. It's easier.
Right, yeah, I might have to start doing that.
My girlfriend will say I'm not even Scottish, but so but I get all this nonsense from you lot.
Well, so we're here today to talk about the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who, which happened some 30 years ago, which, I mean, I'm presuming we all remember this, otherwise it's going to be a very short podcast. But I just thought it'd be fun to celebrate a weird milestone in the show where there was a big Doctor Who anniversary without really the promise of any new Doctor Who. Doctor Who certainly wasn't on the television. I know when you get to the 40th, Doctor Who's as dead as it can possibly be, but there's a promise of a brand new series coming. So here, Doctor Who is dead, and there's a couple of tries to revive it during this time, which we'll talk about how successful or unsuccessful they were. But what I want to know first of all is where we were all at in fandom, whether we were aware it was the 30th anniversary, whether we were celebrating, whether we were done with the show. So I think in sort of to keep some sort of order, I'll go to Ian first.
Blimey. I was reading the magazine. I knew all about every twist and turn the 30th was shaping up to take. I was buying the videos and sort of hiding them from my girlfriend, and sort of keeping a very keen eye on things while at the same time trying to be a little bit aloof and trying to not get too caught up in it all, much like now.
Excellent. What about you, John?
Yeah, I think it's just my first year at university, so I was there, and I was reading the magazine, I was buying new adventures, so obviously I'm here to celebrate the true anniversary story, the Dimension Riders. Buying the videos, I had the tins, I had, I was there recording Dimensions in Time, sat there with the spectacles on. It was a vintage time that many years ago. You ask kids today, and they have to put up with Tales from the TARDIS.
Mark Donaldson, you're a bit younger than those two old people we've just spoken to. So what was your view on it?
I feel seen.
I guess, let's say 1993, I would have been watching Doctor Who for about a year, and all I would have seen would have been those BBC Two repeats. But so I wouldn't read the magazine, wasn't buying videos at this point, because why would I? Because there was Doctor Who kind of every Friday night on BBC Two. But I do remember the sort of the Children in Need thing kind of coming out, and the kind of 3D telly, and getting like your Radio Times with. Did the Radio Times have the glasses, or did you have to go and get the glasses from a separate source? Yeah. I can't remember. But yeah, so I remember all of that and kind of leading up to that, and then kind of not being as furious as I'm sure some of the older members of the group will be, just kind of more being perplexed as to what I'd just seen. Because I think I'm right in saying this, that this would have been the first multi-Doctor story I ever saw, Dimensions in Time. But we'll go on to that later.
Matt Barber, what about you?
Well, Dylan Reese. I'm pretty much the same as, I'm a bit younger than John. I'm a lot younger than Ian, I suspect. So I was at sixth form college. I was sharing my video collection with a friend. Like we were exchanging drugs at the college, so I was getting him into Talons of Weng-Chiang. Yeah, and also
you get somebody in Talons of Weng-Chiang nowadays, and they'll throw you in jail.
Yeah. Back in the good old days when you could do that.
There's a knock on the door coming, Matt, by the way.
I was busy watching everything they were doing on BBC One in Saturday evenings, thinking why couldn't they just be making Doctor Who instead of Bugs, Crime Traveller, Strange, Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, that sort of thing. So it's around that time. And yeah, Doctor Who magazine, we were going through it like a kind of like Inspector Morse, looking for any details. So I can remember very clearly when the Dark Dimension was announced, and then reading the little slip of paper that somebody had shoved into the magazine, telling me that actually it had been cancelled as well at the same time. And that was like, yeah. So it was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
So I came to the 30th anniversary a little bit late, in that I got into the 30th anniversary in particular a year later, even though I started watching Doctor Who in 1989. In a late 92, early 93, I just went off Doctor Who. I got into wrestling, and it's the only time in my life I got into football as well. I briefly got into sports and abandoned my love of Doctor Who.
Which team did you abandon Doctor for?
Aston Villa, whatever they are, whatever that is.
My dad would approve.
And so it was around November time with Dimensions in Time and 30 Years in the TARDIS that I actually got back into the show. And then over the next year or so, I was buying the old issues of the magazine. And so I found out about Dark Dimension and sort of went, oh my God, they made this thing and I've not seen it. And then found out like a couple of months later when I found the other magazine, oh, they didn't make it. So it was trying to piece together the anniversary in a slightly haphazard way, because I was just late to the party, unfortunately. But there we go. So there's this weird thing. It's sort of a myth that Doctor Who finishes and the BBC want nothing to do with it, because it actually feels in the early 90s like the BBC is quite nostalgic for it, and the public are quite nostalgic for it. We've got UK Gold repeats have started, pissing off Doctor Who fans because it had commercial breaks and things like that. And then the BBC Two repeats started, and in 93 we get Genesis, we get Caves, we get Revelation, we get Battlefield, we get Planet of the Daleks. So I guess for Mark, you've already said that this was the equivalent of your new Doctor Who. But I mean, so for you, John, did this seem like a big deal, seeing old Doctor Who on BBC Two?
Yeah, I mean, for a start off, I was like, it's a time meddler. I've never seen the time meddler. I didn't think I was going to get to see that for years. You know, it was also, even the Sea Devils, I hadn't seen that. They're going, that's fantastic. The one thing, as I remember, with The Resistance is Useless, they had that clip show introduced by an anorak, which did upset a few fans as well, particularly since they nicked my anorak to make it, obviously. But yeah, it was great. And then it did kind of feel a big deal that they made 30 years in the TARDIS for it, that documentary, because that was great, because that was the first major thing that had been on BBC One for Doctor Who since 1989. So it kind of felt there was a changing attitude there, not a fully changed one, but there were people sympathetic. I think Alan Yentob was in BBC management at the time, and he was certainly sympathetic, as I remember.
He was in the documentary.
Yeah.
Wasn't he? So now I can't remember what's in that documentary or what's in the more than 30 years in the TARDIS documentary on video. But I remember that documentary was, a spoiler alert, the one good thing that the 30th anniversary brought, other than special video releases. That was such a good documentary. That was, you'd never seen the like. If you're my generation, you'd have to. I mean, even the Talons of Weng-Chiang kind of behind the scenes documentary back in the 70s wasn't as good as 30 Years in the TARDIS.
He's only saying that because he's remembering Larry Turner talking about John Pertwee's shirts.
Oh, and Toya Wilcox talking about how fetishistic the Cybermen were.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the cricketer talking about
Mike Gatting.
So I remember it quite, and even more than the repeats. For some reason, the repeats didn't really inspire me, and I don't know why. Because like John, I hadn't seen the Time Meddler, I hadn't seen the Sea Devils, but I would maybe I was just expecting the videos faster, so the videos were starting to accelerate at that point. So I was kind of watching them thinking, well, I know this story, but that 30 years documentary with the clips and the way it kind of curated the clips and narrated the clips, and then it interviewed, Verity Lambert. It really was. This was before DVDs. This was an epic.
Yeah. It was the first time I'd ever seen Eric Saywood in the flesh, and I thought, he's a strange man, and he still is.
He's very fleshy.
I remember his leather jacket. So, 30 Years in the TARDIS was actually almost the last bit of the anniversary. It went out on the 29th of November of that year, after Dimensions in Time. But I guess that sort of repeat season runs up to it. Now, Mark, as a new fan, do you have any fond memories of the repeats of 93 and again of the documentary itself?
So the documentary, I can't remember if I did see it at the time. I definitely remember watching it quite young, but I feel like it might have been the video that kind of came out subsequently rather than the actual broadcast. But yeah, the repeats were great. I loved it. It's so interesting that, Doctor Who in the 90s, you've got these repeats on Friday nights, which is where, Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and Stingray were going out. But because those were Jerry Anderson shows, there was a kind of concerted effort to kind of make those shows as big in the 90s as they were when they first went out. So you had like toy ranges and like big things on Blue Peter.
Oh,
whereas I think
Turner, yeah.
Yeah, and I think because
the video was huge selling, wasn't it?
Yeah. And because Doctor Who's kind of, I guess, a kind of institutional thing that has a lot of, hooks, you didn't really kind of get that. I do wonder if Doctor Who had been kind of more of an authored thing, if maybe that would have led to some kind of resurgence. But in terms of watching it, it felt like all of those things. It didn't matter to me that it was like 30 years old or whatever. It was just great storytelling. And my earliest memory is Wendy Padbury's arse just on the TARDIS console at the end of the Mind Dropper Part 1. That is my earliest Doctor Who memory.
At the risk of being cynical about it, so Dylan, you said that obviously the BBC had affection for the show or nostalgia for the show because it was showing these repeats. I know there's the videos are brought out by a sort of a branch company from the BBC, but presumably the BBC are repeating it partly because they now understand the commercial potential of Doctor Who in a way that they didn't potentially in sort of 87, 88. So the resurgence of interest in the BBC might be, accountants behind the scenes going, well, if we start feeding it, it would be really good.
But people were still watching.
Yeah,
but the commercial aspect was the whole genesis behind Dark Dimension, wasn't it? It was, on the one hand, it was Tom Baker wants to do Doctor Who again, but on the other hand, it was BBC Enterprises going, there's a lot of Doctor Who fans spending quite a large amount of money on books, videos, like cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Maybe we should give them something brand new that they would really actually want to sink their teeth into.
And there's only one place we can go for it. Adrian Rigglesford. he's the man.
Douglas Adams said no.
What's that you said? Terrence Dix? No, let's not go for Terrence Dix. Let's go for Adrian Rigglesford.
A man with a huge and respected track record in film scripts.
Yeah.
He's still doing of them, probably.
We'll get on to the Dark Dimension and what could have been very shortly, but Ian's been very quiet for once. So, Ian, what about you? Do you have any fond memories of the repeats of 30 Years in the TARDIS that you want to share with us all?
I'm happy you asked me that, Dylan. Oh, sorry. It's because JR isn't here, so there's no one to interrupt people.
Yes, Matt, you've had all the Oreos, haven't you? So you're just on that sugar rush.
It kind of fed into this overall narrative. They were repeating Doctor Who. The magazine every 6 months would say, oh yeah, they're in talks with someone else to bring it back. And it just felt like there was not the most powerfully concerted effort, but there was some kind of dynamic to keep the show alive and keep it ticking over. I enjoyed the repeats. I could kind of remember. I don't think I watched Battlefield because I still have that on video. But it would have been the first time I saw the Time Meddler and the Mind Robber. I didn't watch was it the Silurians?
That
Sea
was much
Devils.
later on.
Sea Devils. Sea Devils I watched. Genesis, I thought, why show this one again? We've all seen this so many times. Similarly, Caves. I think a lot of them I had on video by then. But it was just really, the way I chose to interpret it was that this is the BBC trying to keep the show alive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it feels like the time perhaps that the BBC, again, could be driven by monetary factors, but they start paying a bit more attention to the VHS range. So first, there's a lot of VHSs released that year, far too many to go through, but you do get some sort of specials. You get Silver Nemesis in its silvery green cover.
Let's make magic.
Sorry, but that Silver Nemesis video was the other documentary. That's the best documentary Doctor Who's ever produced. That Canadian documentary is amazing.
Absolutely, you get that, and it's an extended version of it. We get the Demons in Colour, which had been broadcast the year before, but it was released on video. And then we got Trial of a Time Lord and Remembrance of the Daleks and The Chase in tins. So, what a rush for a person of a certain age. Hearing videos in tins sends a shiver down your spine, doesn't it, Ian?
That was my birthday present that year. The Trial tin. And I remember really liking it because I was very young then, you know.
Did we all have the Trial tin?
Yes, I had the Trial tin.
Which Doctor did you have on the bottom?
I had Sylvester.
I had Colin.
Oh, you jammy sod. It was you that found it.
Yes.
I had Pertwee. Great times. Great time.
I'm sorry.
I don't think I ever had the Trial tin. I think my mate had it, so it was kind of just a kind of timeshare.
What Doctor did he have on it?
Sort of situation. I honestly can't remember. I don't think I ever twigged that there. I think he might have had Colin, because I feel like I didn't know that there was other Doctors on the base, which either means I didn't look at it or it was Colin Baker.
And it was also the first time we ever got a season of Doctor Who released as a whole in the form of Trial of a Time Lord. So did that feel monumental to any of us, all of us, John Arnold?
Yeah, it's it's 4 stories in one sit, 14 episodes. Great, I can watch it. I hadn't particularly liked it 10 years or 7 years earlier, and here I could relive it in the comfort of my own house again. I was more excited about Remembrance, to be honest, because my dad had failed to record 4th episode in 1988, so I finally had the 4th episode on tape at last. It's like the completest in my soul was singing. Beautiful. Watching
Trial was a weird experience.
It was a trial
because it was kind of nostalgic, but it was so recent, but it was shit as well at the same time. But that nostalgia did kind of drive you through watching. I did watch it pretty much in one sitting. For the last time.
I mean, I was 11 years old, so I didn't. It didn't seem shit to me. It was the most exciting thing in the world. Seeing those.
It's new Doctor Who to you, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. The best way to watch Doctor Who is completely out of order and at the behest of the BBC release schedule over about 15 years.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not wrong.
Definitely. I will not countenance any, because it's all going up in the iPlayer in a couple of weeks, in a couple of days.
But
I won't countenance any of this kind of watch it from an unearthly child to survival nonsense.
We're not going to be watching it from an unearthly child, are we?
No, we're not. Don't watch it from the Daleks to survival.
But the question: VHS or DVD order?
Well, VHS.
Purist. I like it.
So hang on. Let's just get this straight. Dylan, you're advocating a rewatch of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
In VHS release order from Revenge of the Cybermen onwards. Or
I'm actually advocating them doing it in the order my Uncle Kevin bought them for me.
okay, that
Hey,
sounds like
even better.
an absolute new podcast. All of Doctor Who in the order that Uncle Kevin bought it for me. and then you can pretend you haven't seen it before, and you can describe how you're absorbing this Doctor Who into based on your first episode being, I don't know, The Awakening or whatever.
Dr. Kev.
Dr. Kev, what a guy! I've got strong memories of watching the Dominators with him and the Zero Imperative. But
Really?
anyway,
Wow.
You mean they
You
didn't
watched
put a
Zero
restraining
Imperative
order
and
on
the
him?
Dominators with your uncle. Out of context, that could end up with somebody on a register. But
not Uncle Kev. No, not Uncle Kev. So quickly moving on before I accidentally send my uncle to jail. Some other merch at the time was we got these. We were used to these coffee table books of Doctor Who, the Key to Time, Peter Heining's multiple books. But for the first time, we actually got a complete history of the show because it was over in the form of time frame, and we also had Doctor Who the 60s, which was a deep look at that. Did we all own these books? Did we pick them up at the time, Matt Barber?
Yes.
Great.
I definitely had time frame. I was a bit disappointed because I'm not a visual person, but I liked,
Right.
pretty pictures were great, but I wanted information. I want raw information. I wanted analysis. I wanted behind the scenes information, dates, times, budgets, viewing figures.
Yeah.
What was the other one? Time
It
frame.
was the 60s.
Oh,
The
60s.
The 60s
book.
was great. No, yeah, it must have been earlier because I did a school project on the history of the Daleks. Surely, when was the 60s released then? Was that in 93?
It was 92, I think.
Oh, maybe it was the softback version that came out
Yeah.
Okay,
in
yeah.
93.
I mean, that was a good book as well. That had, you genuinely felt like an archaeologist reading the 60s book, and it was really prettily presented. My problem at the moment is I can't remember when I got all of these books, apart from the Adrian Rigglesford book. I didn't bother to get that one, which was a bit
Monsters
later.
or the Doctors?
The Companion. There was one about companions, wasn't there?
Oh, that was David Howe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so
That was a bit later.
Which is the one where Rigglesford had a typo and put dildo instead of dido?
That's the Doctors. That was Box Tree's very well proofread range.
Yes, yeah. So I didn't have that.
And it also missed out season 18 completely as well, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Speaking of books, so Ian, you like a book or two. We also had we finally got the novelizations of Evil of the Daleks and Power of the Daleks. Did you pick them up to complete your target set?
No. I read them.
Outrageous.
I got them out of the library. I wasn't a massive Second Doctor fan. It's weird. I was like fiercely completist about my era, but really not that engaged with previous ones.
Racist. I loved it. Those books. Sorry to Ian stopped. Have you stopped speaking, Ian? Okay. Those books are the best things that John Peel ever wrote. They were really good, and I reread them, and they were rereadable. I haven't reread them recently, but they were so good.
It's. I think Evil's good, but Power does go over the top on the continuity references. It's like you read the first page, and it's pure fan wank.
Right.
It's a 10th planet. But no, it was great to have them as well, and I loved that cover for Power in particular. Just the Doctor and the electrical kind of thing of the darts come across. Yeah, it was just thrilling to have because something you never thought you'd have.
And I'd also spent years. I don't know when were they released on tape with the Colin Baker and.
Oh, is it 91 or 92?
Yeah, so I'd spent a couple of years desperately trying to understand what was going on from the really crackly tapes on my Walkman for 2 years.
And Eric Saber's narration not being helpful.
So reading the book of Evil of the Daleks, it's a bit like you're approaching the story from lots of different angles, because I didn't really follow it on tape because I couldn't hear half of it. The book kind of filled in some of the gaps, and then obviously the animations some more, and the better quality tapes and stuff like that. But at this point, the books are really useful.
We had Evil on the 30th for the 30th anniversary. we've got another novelisation of Evil for the 60th anniversary. What are we doing for the 90th anniversary here? How are they going to
Get it all
novelise
back.
it now?
Somebody's going to write about Fraser Hines writing about his novel.
Novelise the animation.
Yeah, yeah.
So beyond that sort of merch, Doctor Who finally comes back in one form or another on radio in the August with the Paradise of Death. Now, Mark, as a new fan, did you jump into that radio play then, or experience it later?
I did. I remember that. I remember getting like a little cassette tape and recording it off the radio as well. So like I remember listening to it, and because it was like new Doctor Who and I'd loved the Sea Devils like the year previously. So yeah, I do remember kind of tuning into the Paradise of Death and really enjoying it. And obviously now when you look back at it and you know the whole Pertwee era, it feels like a sort of this kind of weird curio that doesn't quite sit with the rest of the era. But at the time, it was great. It was like, yes, new John Pertwee Doctor Who.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, bringing back a past Doctor for an anniversary special, it would never happen now. That's all I can say.
No.
So, John, what about you? Were you there, sat next to your radio, listening to the Paradise of Death, listening to Nick Courtney talking about painting his toes and all that jazz?
God, yeah, and I was waiting for the novelisation as well, so I could then complete my target novelisation set yet again. It was just good to hear Doctor Who again. It was a form of broadcast Doctor Who, you know. How should I put it? You know, you might think of the radio Doctor Who as I should say, it's not heroin. It's what's the substitute for heroin again? I can't remember. But
not of
Methadone
for me. But...
There you go. That's exactly
but
it.
it sounds like you've just wandered off topics to get recommendations for when you go out onto the street afterwards.
Well, if I ever go up to Birmingham, I know what to get. That's great. So yeah, it's up my best. But so you've got some lovely character actors in there as well. Is it Harold Innocent?
Harold Innocent's in there. Who else?
What's his face from the Happiness Patrol as well, isn't it? But yeah,
loads of those people.
It's really beautifully cast. You know, lots of fruity character actors doing what they do. A kind of plot which is kind of baggy, but which is epic, which is deliberately, you know, going, we're not on TV anymore. We'll go for it. And yeah, it was fantastic, and I could understand why they'd come back and do another one, which, you know, maybe wasn't quite as good.
Did you know when it was first announced, they didn't know whether it was going to be written by Barry Letts or Eric Saywood? Now, Ian, do you think it would have been better if it was written by Eric Saywood?
I'm trying to think what that would have been like. I mean, it would have been like Slipback, but probably not even as good as Slipback. What Doctor do you think Saywood would have used?
I think he probably had to use Pertwee, would he? It had to be Pertwee, I think.
Well,
they have him back. Yeah.
So Eric Saywood trying to write a previous era would have been, I don't know, he'd have had like weird pseudo companions whose dialogue was like really not representative of the 70s or the 90s. So in many ways, it would have been quite similar to what Barry Letts gave us.
He'd have brought out his Robert Holmes Ouija board from his cupboard and sat there for an hour trying to communicate with him.
Yeah.
I just don't know what Robert Holmes. I know what Robert Holmes would have done. There's loads of it. I just don't know what Eric Saywood would have done with the John Pertwee era. You know, an era that's known for its sort of family atmosphere. It's regulars that get on with each other and actually kind of like each other. I can't see Eric Saywood even beginning to understand people getting on with each other.
It would have been 5 episodes of shooting and death and unrelenting misery, wouldn't it?
Which is what Unit is perfect for, obviously.
Very true. Very true. So we then start to get sort of an idea that there might be an anniversary special from BBC Video, essentially BBC Worldwide, and this is The Dark Dimension. Now, me and Mark have talked about this in quite some length on my podcast before. So I'm going to kind of leave it to you guys to have a chat about Dark Dimension a little bit, but because you can go and dig that up somewhere. We did about an hour and a half on it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So, so John, could you sum up for people what the Dark Dimension is in case they don't know what it was?
Adrian Rygelsford's fantasy. Who's that? It was Tom Baker was willing to come back and do Doctor Who, and BBC Worldwide. It was Worldwide at the time, was it? Or was it Enterprises?
No, I think it was still
Enterprises.
Enterprises, yeah. They thought this was a good idea. They got Graham Harper on board. There's that little picture of Adrian and Graham meeting that was in Doctor Who magazine and seemed absolutely thrilling at the time. And it's the Doctor and is it Hawksmoor is the name of the guy in it?
Yeah.
And they were trying to.
I thought it was Hawkspur.
Oh, maybe it is Hawksmoor. Hawksmoor's a restaurant.
Hawksmoor's a famous architect in London. He built churches in London. Not
now he makes steaks.
Are we back
wanted to bring the highbrow.
You're defining Hawksmoor. I've got to find out which one's the right one.
It's Hawksmoor.
Famously, Hawksmoor's churches, according to Alan Moore and somebody else whose name I forget, they're in a pentagram in London. So he positioned them in an arcot. It's from hell. He picked it up from another psycho. Anyway, carry on. Sorry.
And I believe they're trying to get Rick Mail for Hawksmoor, weren't they? Yeah. I have. Someone did a self-published novelization of it, or I don't know if it's the actual story, but I bought it off one of those cheap websites that allow you to print absolutely anything. It's yes, and fundamentally the other doctors weren't very happy with it because Tom would have been paid more and would have appeared more. And funnily enough, still being the more current doctor was like, hang on a second, I should be leading this. And it all fell through quite disastrously. And probably, I think, was it Philip Segal had said he nixed it as well? He squashed it.
I think no one really quite knows what happens, but I think Philip Segal said he squashed it, but also they got the budgeting wrong anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Richard Bignell's quite extensive excavation of the Dark Dimension in like Nothing at the End of the Lane, I think says it's probably not likely that Segal did nix it because there's like a month between his last contact with Alan Yentop and them saying, okay, now you can go and do the Doctor Who TV movie. They don't speak in that period. And in the middle of that month, there's this budget thing with there's a sort of dispute between BBC Enterprises and the drama department over who's paying for what and what the commercial return is. And they go, do you know what? Nah, it's not worth doing. So they just cancel it basically.
It was extremely low budget even for Doctor Who standards, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, given what they wanted to do with it as well. It's just
You know what I really like about the whole Dark Dimension affair? It's how it turned Doctor Who magazine into some sort of All the President's Men investigatory. And all through this period, I really liked the magazine because the news section, Gallifrey Guardian, is oscillating between being absolutely desperate for any kind of threads of David Burton, any kind of threads of news, and also actually genuinely quite good at sort of digging up information like the Jerry Davis Terry Nation potential collaboration, and it becomes a really interesting document, the news section of all of these sort of tangled will they won't they bring it back. And the Dark Dimension is kind of the climax to that because it was basically announced and then disputed in the same issue of the magazine. It was this big dramatic kind of it's back, no it isn't, later on.
Yeah. Ian, do you remember being disappointed by this? Where the news of it? Do you remember it all unfolding? Did you have high hopes?
Well, so I remember being like so excited when I can't remember if it was like 2 consecutive issues where it was back, then it was cancelled, or if it was just one issue. But I remember being so excited that it was back. And at the time, I didn't really find out anything about how it was going to be all about the Fourth Doctor and the other Doctors wouldn't be in it. And that, I think, came out after they'd already cancelled it. So yeah, I was really upset at the time that it had almost come back and hadn't. But I don't know that had it have come back in the Adrian Rigglesford version, that I would have necessarily loved it quite that much.
No, I think.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, I'm going to talk about myself. I wasn't particularly excited because I think at that point I really wanted the series to come back, and it was obvious that there was some potential. So every time they announced a TV movie or a one-off drama or the radio series, I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, but when are they going to start making Doctor Who as a series again?
Yeah.
And it always felt like they were really good at feeding us well, it's coming. At some point, it's coming. Just watch this space, it's coming. And I happily fed off that for 10 effing years, believing it each time. And then it became true. I mean, it's only 10 years after this that it came true.
Amateur, 16, some of us, 16.
I mean, the idea of doing a special, though, like a sort of anniversary special, where they bring back the most popular Doctor and kind of just ignore everybody that came after them. I mean, you just wouldn't do that now. It'd be really disrespectful and weird. I don't know why you would even think.
Exactly. So, one thing there was in the 30th anniversary that there isn't going to be this year is a big event celebrating the entire history of the show. And this was in the form of Panopticon 93, which had all the living Doctors, most of the living companions. Obviously, Jackie Lane wasn't there. And it was a big, huge event. Did any of us go to Panopticon 1993?
Tragically, no. I didn't start going to con until 96, so I missed out. I could did the 2003 Panopticon, but that's an entirely different matter.
We'll do that in 10 years' time.
So,
I went to Doctor Who Returns to Swindon in 1992. If that helps.
I wasn't aware Doctor Who had ever been to Swindon to return to it.
Or Doctor Who Returns to Wiltshire, I think it was framed, but it was in Swindon.
it's where they kidnapped Billy Piper.
Right.
Ian, did you go by any chance?
No, I went to ZyCon 26 in 1989 in Colchester, and that was my one and only convention. At that point, I wasn't quite I wasn't sort of solvent and independent enough to have travelled the country should I have wanted to go to these things.
Understandable. Well, that sort of is the tail end of that conversation because I wasn't there either. But what I will say is they released the highlights on VHS, and I had them and used to watch them religiously because I was a weird child. But they're the sort of panels that appear on the DVD box sets all the time now. So slowly but surely, we're all reliving Panopticon 93 through Andrew Beach's archive.
I mean, everything's on YouTube as well. So this is I mean, the magic's slightly lost when you've got all these pirated and secretly distributed videos of interviews, but now you just...
I don't know what you're talking about.
So Dylan, what was your favourite interview from Panopticon 93?
Well, obviously, it's the Four Doctors interview that was on the most recent Blu-ray set, where they get 4 out of the 5 Doctors alive. Tom Baker does his own little panel separately, but he doesn't want to hang out with them. But if those highlights were anywhere on the internet and had I seen them, I would really, really enjoy watching them. So EastEnders was also on in the 90s. Mark, you're a big EastEnders fan. See with the link there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm a lapsed EastEnders fan, I think.
Okay. Were you watching EastEnders in 1993?
I was 7 years old, Dylan. I think there would be far too much sex and violence. But Revelation of the Daleks and Caves of Androzani on a Friday night were perfectly fine. But no, I don't think I was watching EastEnders.
Shame. It was really in a sweet spot in 93. You've got Phil and Grant, and it's all kicking off with them, and it was wonderful.
We used to watch it as a family, so it kind of didn't feel that odd when Doctor Who suddenly showed up in it, because if there were 2 things we spent a lot of time as a family watching, it was Doctor Who and EastEnders, so someone just put them together.
I mean, it does feel like a natural kind of combination of like the BBC's 2 sort of big shows.
Well, it is something they do
for children in need.
These charity specials, isn't it? You get what everyone doing Strictly Come Dancing these days, isn't it? Whatever.
Yeah.
EastEnders to Strictly Come Dancing. Country Fathers Strictly Come Dancing. Repair Shop to Strictly Come Dancing.
Didn't Matt Smith show up on like Call the Midwife or something to deliver a baby? I feel like that was a comic relief for children in need thing at some point.
One of the nuns in Call the Midwife is a big Doctor Who fan, so you do see Doctor Who playing in the background. And I think, according to Jim Curry Smith, it's actually period accurate to the episodes.
Nice.
Wow. So we are, of course, talking about Dimensions in Time, which was a 12-minute Doctor Who, a 5-minute episode and a 7-minute. It all came down to this. It was broadcast as part of Children in Need and Noel's House Party on the 26th and 27th of November of that year. So when you initially heard about this exciting crossover, Ian, what did you think? What did you think of this idea?
I struggle to remember now. I think probably there would have been a certain frustration that they had to incorporate all the EastEnders toot into it because you just want to see new Doctor Who. But my girlfriend at the time would have been, why have they got to put all that Doctor Who toot in an EastEnders special? So we were very much on opposite sides of that televisual fence.
Quite. Matt Barber, what about you? What did you think of this meeting of two of the BBC's greatest franchises?
I was very worried because they made a big thing, I vaguely remember, of saying this isn't a skit, this isn't a sketch or a comedy thing, this is an actual Doctor Who episode that we're producing. This is absolutely a Doctor Who episode, and you'll be able to watch it like a Doctor Who episode. We are producing Doctor Who, they were telling me. And the fierceness that they were saying that made me think that it was probably going to be a skit and not a Doctor Who episode. So I was kind of wary, and it did feel a bit like they were throwing out raw meat to the baying fans who had just heard about the Dark Dimension being cancelled. It felt a bit like that. And I think even then, I think JNT was going through a down bit, so I don't
breakdown, Jimmy.
Well, no, I don't think his
stock wasn't high.
His stock wasn't high in Doctor Who fandom at that point because of the campaign by Dreamwatch and various other things, and the fact that he was in charge when it dropped off the air. So I don't think he'd had that resurgence, which I think did come, but maybe in sort of when we started seeing the interviews on the DVDs and various other things. Yeah. So I didn't really take him. I took everything he said with a pinch of salt, basically.
But the problem with the JNT thing is that he was actually, without JNT, we wouldn't have had that sort of feature-length extended edit of Curse of Fenric, and we wouldn't have had Shadow on VHS and all these other things. So yeah, Dimensions in Time kind of undercuts that slightly, but it's interesting because I would, for something else related to the 90s that I was writing for Film Stories today, I was doing a bit of a kind of dive into the whole thing, and it was JNT that first kind of suggested the idea of a kind of straight-to-video, brand new Doctor Who episodes. And apparently this was like in 1990, and the guy he was working on those ideas with was the guy who would eventually co-write Dimensions in Time with him. And one of the ideas was the Nightmare Fair, because JNT bloody loves the Celestial Toymaker. And apparently, when it looked like they weren't going to get the Albert Square set, they thought, oh, should we do Dimensions in Time, but with the Celestial Toymaker instead of the Rani? And it's like in some kind of like playroom instead of Albert Square. But it was a very quick kind of turnaround to go, no, we've got it. It's fine. Don't worry.
Why would you think about
Celestial Toymaker, man?
Yeah. Why do you think about bringing it back for an anniversary? What sort of madman would do that?
I just for the record, I quite like JNT. I just, at that point in the 1990s, I was very much led by what other older fans were telling me.
So in this 12 minutes, does JNT manage to capture the essence of Doctor Who in the short run time? Mark Donaldson.
Okay, so in the sense that, so I rewatched it the other day, and I do genuinely think Tom Baker's little monologue, where he talks about how the Rannies captured the first and second Doctor, and he goes, the grumpy one and the flautist. That's funny. That is genuinely quite funny. Now, I don't know if that's a Tom Baker ad lib or if that, but I feel like it wouldn't be because he doesn't care about Patrick Troughton and William Hartnell. So that's good. But the rest of it is very much kind of just running around. I mean, I guess it's running around a static location chased by monsters, and there's some technobabble that saves the day. So yeah, I guess he does kind of capture the indefinable magic of Doctor Who in that regard.
Can I cut in it? I also watched it yesterday, and what it captured perfectly was the experience of playing Doctor Who in the playground. Because whoever is playing the Doctor will sort of randomly throw in mannerisms and lines from each Doctor for no reason. There's lots of pointless running around. There's technobabble to kind of force running around into a sort of weird narrative. And for 12 minutes, you got to experience again the exact experience of being a child playing Doctor Who. And all the actors got to have that experience as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's horribly mischaracterizes a lot of the companions as well, especially when Leela has to reel off a bunch of techno babble at the end.
Not before she cloned me.
Just in case you missed that important plot detail.
It was absolutely right though.
It was quite good to see, a couple of the companions who would go on to star in EastEnders, like, Bonnie Langford and Louise Jameson, getting their first, maybe they came away from the experience thinking, well, the Doctor Who bit wasn't so hot, but they look like they're having fun in this little quad. Maybe I'll move here.
It did predict that Kathy Beale would still be alive. Dimensions of Time, even though she died in 1998 or whatever it was. I can't remember, but yeah.
So, Matt, Mandy Mitchell or Big Ron, which one was the right choice to get you out of that cliffhanger?
Does the Big Ron stuff still exist, doesn't it?
Yes,
it does.
It's on YouTube as well, isn't it? If I remember rightly.
It is, and it's in a little folder that may or not be shared between us on a Dropbox as well.
I mean, as a gimmick goes, it's pretty underwhelming to vote for these two. I don't know. I don't care.
Well, Big Ron is fundamentally an extra, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, could they not have got two of the big stars of EastEnders to do that one line of dialogue? I mean, you can choose Phil or Grant. That would have absolutely been massive. But
yeah,
but the big thing about that was, what was Liz Shaw doing? She just suddenly, and that's not a character beat.
Running very slowly towards a foe with a weapon is not a good idea.
Inexplicably, if that had been Leela, I can see Leela working in that moment, because Leela really would go for the Rani with a Janus Storm or something. But Liz Shaw, it doesn't make sense, Dylan. Dimensions of Time doesn't make sense.
I didn't write it.
It's really badly written.
Obviously, the most important thing, though, it canonizes the Ultimate Adventure.
Does
it? Because you've got you've got Little Monster from the Ultimate Adventure in that queue of monsters.
Oh yes,
yeah. They couldn't get the Daleks, but they could get that little creature.
So are we saying Dimensions in Time is canon?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, despite the fact, EastEnders is a TV show in the Doctor Who universe in Army of Ghosts, and it's real in Dimension in Time.
It's set in the land of fiction.
Doctor Who's a TV show in EastEnders, so it's all fine.
I figured it was a time warp. Just
no one's tempted to just pretend it's not canon.
No.
Okay. Broadcast on BBC One prime time. I think it's got the highest non-strike ratings of any Doctor Who story.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to Steve McFadden and Lalla Ward being reunited on the iPlayer for Tales from the TARDIS, Dimensions in Time. Where Romana and Phil Mitchell reminisce about, Dimensions in Time.
One line of dialogue and that frisson they shared.
I think
that knee trembler in the garage.
I think Lalla Ward was really good.
Yeah,
I think Lala Ward, considering she's sort of stopped acting, I think she's one of those people around that time who could have pulled off
Bill Mitchell.
a Tom Baker.
So the phone-in raised £101,000 for children in need at 35p a minute. So a lot of people voted for that outcome, and there was not that many members in the DWAS at that time. So people were obviously engaged with it.
Oh, the day of action. Come on, we know the phone repeatedly. Okay. On this call here, how many of us actually phoned in and voted? And who did you vote for if you did?
I think I might. I don't know. Nah, my mum and dad would not have let me anywhere near the bloody phone for a premium rate phone call. Nah.
Hang on.
Even if it was for children in
joke?
need, they'd be like, just bung a
jokes about
fiver in the
Scottish
charity
people?
box. No, just, sensible people. Frugal. Danny.
So, John,
Yes.
2 of your leading actors have sadly passed away. Is it right to start it with the floating severed heads in a time vortex?
Those magnificent 3D models.
Mm.
The thing is, however, you could probably have done a clip of them, but you've already done that for the 20th anniversary. So why not embrace the technology, embrace the 3D, and just have what might be their heads, what vaguely resembles the crania of Tregnant floating through time, pickled in time.
You have to wonder where those heads are now and what they've been done with. What terrible things may have happened to Hartnell's head.
The second Doctor didn't play a flute. Why was he a flautist?
There he is at last.
Maybe it was Tom Baker then. Maybe
30 years. That's bugged me. That he's not a flautist. I'm a Jethro Tull fan. I know what a flautist is when I see one.
So
gag.
we also get the Rani in this. Ian, is the Rani the right choice of villain for an anniversary celebration such as this?
Well, I think you want one of the big iconic villains, if not the Daleks, then the Master. Or if you can't get anyone else at all, you bring back the Rani. It was like Time in the Rani all over again. It's like, can we not get anyone better? She was, she still had sort of notoriety and cachet, so it probably pulled in a few extra viewers. But yeah, no, I would have, I'd have been much happier to have seen someone in a crap fake beard pretending to be the Master.
But you get Sam West in this as well.
What we're forgetting here, though, is that it's not Doctor Who's 30th anniversary special. I mean, it is, but kind of by default. It's for children in need, and I think the idea of Doctor Who on Albert Square with Kate O'Mara as the baddie is like high camp. Like this is going to get people phoning in. So yeah, I think Anthony Ainley is not getting any extra viewers for the instant time.
Hey, I'd have watched it twice.
I think that's an important point, though, that Mark makes. It's kind of that J&T sensibility, so it's very much in tune with his version of Doctor Who. It's like if he didn't have Saywood, Cartmel, Bidmead there to sort of just provide a creative counterpoint. It's that high camp, high concept. Thank you very much. And as I said, the only other one that I think J&T script edited and created for himself was Time of the Rani. So yes, it does very much resemble that.
And Kate O'Mara is one of the few actors, presumably big actors, presumably who's still got enough affection for the series to agree to. It would be her or Anthony Ainley.
Yeah, well, she came back from she was filming in America and she hated it, so she wanted to come back and film Doctor Who. She preferred Doctor Who to the American TV system.
Is that true though, or is it just the sort of thing you say when you're in a quarry or Albert Square somewhere and it's pissing down
with rain? Why else would you go to a quarry in the middle of winter?
And she's good. California. She's the other good thing about her.
Yeah.
The things I like are Lala Ward, Kate O'Mara, and Peter Davison in that outtake where he's really trying not to laugh and deliver something to camera, and then he stops and then they say cut, and then his face just tells you everything about where he is and how he feels about being where he is.
I say,
And the other one,
do you not like the Brigadier and the Sixth Doctor meeting?
no, I like
Hand your fan
I
card
like
in.
John Pertwee getting ever increasingly annoyed at the amateurness of it when somebody says "I'm Q," and he goes, "Do you mean action?"
Do you mean action?
Unless somebody says action, I don't care.
Hi,
if it's for the-
Havoc.
I don't care if it's for the children. I'm not moving until somebody says action. So I like that bit as well.
Well, I mean, the best bit about it, I think, is the third Doctor visiting Noel's house party at the beginning of episode 1 or 2. And he goes, "No, I heard he was thick. I thought they were talking about his waist." It's just the best moment as a kid to see these worlds collide. We're all sitting down to watch Noel's house party every weekend, and to see actual Doctor Who there was absolutely great fun. What other highlights do we have from it? Matt's given some of his. John, what about you?
Well, I said Doctor the Brigadier meeting. Obviously, the greatest line in Doctor Who history. Who was that terrible woman? Beautifully delivered. I do like Kate O'Mara, and she actually gets exactly the tone that's needed. You know, she's not mocking it, but her performance is not entirely serious. She knows it's that camp, it's what people want. So yeah, Kate O'Mara, and it's just the nostalgia of it. You know, back then I did go, it's EastEnders. I was probably a terrible snob at the time, wanted Doctor Who to be taken seriously because I was in my teens still. But it's just a nice piece of nostalgia. It's what the public kind of think Doctor Who's like. They don't remember, the plots, the drama, bit shit, bit camp, occupies 10, 15 minutes. I've come. I wouldn't say it's great, but I've made my peace with it a long time ago. I can watch it, and I've shown my son to it, so I'm on the register as well, like Uncle Ken.
Ian, would you rather Dimensions in Time or the Dark Dimension exist?
Or in a fix with the Sontarans?
That's a higher register. I think I'd take Dimensions in Time over the Dark Dimension. I think Dimensions in Time was like John was saying, a sort of perfect throwaway 15-minute bit of fun aimed squarely at the general public. I mean, sure, it pissed off a few thousand Doctor Who fans who wanted a bit of serious Doctor Who. But looking at it now, looking at what it was and how much money there was available to make it, I think it's a wonderful little thing.
Okay. Mark Donaldson, is it canon in the EastEnders universe?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Because Pauline died.
One of the characters dies 10 years before. Doesn't Wendy Richards' character die?
Time's in flux.
And there's a mini railway, isn't there?
Gillian Anderson was still alive, and then she died, and then she was back alive. It's time's in flux. But I just want to say highlight of.
Do you think that's going to happen with Wendy Richards?
Maybe. For EastEnders' 60th anniversary.
Yeah.
No, my highlight of Dimensions in Time is it's a rubbish joke, but it just really never fails to make me laugh. Is when Liz Shaw gets like pulled into the Queen Vic?
Yeah.
And oh no, it's Romana, isn't it? Romana gets pulled. And Frank Butcher just turns to the camera and is like, "Well, I've seen him run out of the Queen Vic. I've never seen him pulled in."
It's your chin acting as well, isn't it?
Love it.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
My favourite bit is just the fact that Lord Kiv is sat on a bin for part of it, which I just think is brilliant.
I do also like the shot of the top of the Queen Vic in the window, and there's some monsters which very clearly have actors in them, and then there's other monsters that are very clearly just static props.
Yeah, and Andrew Beach gets his moment of glory as well, obviously.
Many moments of glory.
Indeed.
Yeah. Is anybody got anything else they want to say about about Dimensions in Time, or should we rate it out of 10?
I think JR wanted us to rate it out of 10. Good grief.
Oh, good God.
But
in what context are we rating it in the pantheon
in
of
terms of
Doctor Who
EastEnders or
stories?
Doctor Who?
or because you could just rate it on its own about how much you enjoy just watching the individual thing. But if I'm comparing it to Pyramids of Mars, then it's not going to. It's not
It's
going
just
to
getting a
survive
10 off
very
you,
well.
obviously.
I think it's what you could. I mean, if you really need this, Matt, to give it a score, I would say is how do you rank it against things like, that thing with Dermot O'Leary and Matt Smith, or Music of the Spheres from the Proms,
The after
or
party.
in a fix with the Sontarans.
So
where does it sit
non-canon stuff.
in all of
So
these.
it's canon, but I'm scoring it in relation to non-canon products.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what
Not
we're
confusing
saying.
at all.
Okay, right, fine. It's still not going to do very well.
It's all canon. Heathen.
Go on.
Oh,
Matt,
do you want me
should
to
go
you want me to
first.
score it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Legacy
it's
members
got-
go first.
I mean, it's got to be terribly low, isn't it? Like 3. I mean, what did I do? The film version of Day of the Triffids, that was pretty low, but this is pretty low as well. So I'd say between a 2 and a 3, but I'll give it a 3 because of Kate Mara.
Okay, great. Mark?
I think as a charity sketch, I'm going to give it just right down the middle. I'm going to be a centrist dad. I'm going to give it a 5 because there's some good bits in it. It's good fun. It's not the Doctor Who anniversary special that people wanted because, of course, it isn't. If you had a rational thought in your brain, of course, it was never going to be that. So yeah, 5 out of 10. Why not?
Okay, Ian?
So at the time, I probably would have given it a 3, but watching it recently, I think it's a 7 or an 8, probably an 8. It was fun. It was fun. It was as much fun to see the old EastEnders actors again as it was to see, just to see Phil and Grant with a bit of hair at the back. That was worth the entry fee alone.
This is 8 out of 10.
Ranking it on its own merits. I'm not comparing it to Remembrance. I'm comparing it to what Dylan said, and I enjoyed it very much.
I mean, if it was compared to Remembrance, I mean, oh no, wait, I was going to make a joke. No, Remembrance, the Sylvester McCoy one. I'm going to take that back.
I mean,
quite right.
If you rank it in comparison to like the poos my dog produces on walks, then I would give it a 7 or 8 out of 10 because sometimes those poos can be rancid and I have to pick them up and put them in the bin. But
that's not what we're rating it against.
Ooh,
that's the only thing that I would rate it 8 against. But this is a free podcast. But I am telling JR.
You have let your opinion be known. Ian can have his. John Arnold, what about you?
I think like Ian, I would have said 3 at the time, but frankly, I think if you're not giving it a 7, you have no heart, and you're taking Doctor
I'll give it
far
a 7.
too seriously.
Yeah.
Is there some sort of hypnotism going on in this airways? Oh, screw it! I'll give it a 9. Take my score for 9.
Sure.
It's great, right?
Mark reminded me of the best joke in it as well. So I've added an extra mark for that as well, completely.
And I too am giving it an 8. I think it's an absolute hoot. It's not very good, but it is great fun, and more importantly, it's short. So anytime I want to stick on a fun bit of Doctor Who, I can be done in 12 minutes. Make of that what you will.
Premature ejaculation.
So
do you sometimes mix it up with the Big Ron ending?
I think the Big Ron version is the definitive cut. I don't muck about with Mandy.
It's what Scorsese would have done, let's face it.
I don't know whether this is the time and place to talk about the Ian Levine cut, but maybe we'll save that for another podcast. But the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who was almost over. As I said, 30 years in the TARDIS came a little bit after that, but we talked about that. But in December, we get probably what is the definitive celebration of the Doctor Who's 30th anniversary. The multi-Doctor spectacular, the Air Zone solution from BBV.
Oh yeah,
of course.
Oh.
So let's just go around and see who's seen it and what we think of it. We won't spend too much time on it. So, John Arnold, is this the definitive Doctor Who celebration of the 30th anniversary?
Well, we've always wanted to see Colin and Nicola. in that sort of situation, haven't we? No, it's been 20 years since I've seen this. So it was, again, methadone at the time. It's actors you like that you're happy to watch. It's like old friends coming back. Again, this is the same sort of thing as Dimensions in Time, but it's really not very good. It's terrible. So yes, in a way it is.
So for anybody listening at home who doesn't know what the air zone solution is, which I think is probably very few people, it's a BBV. It's not even a Doctor Who spin-off. It's just a bunch of Doctor Who actors playing the roles in an environmental sci-fi thriller. Ian Martin, have you seen the air zone solution? Do you love it?
I haven't seen it. So the calculation was I could have sent off and bought a copy, or I could have spent that money on 5 pints of beer. Now, me in the 90s is a great unknown, largely because of all the beer. But that is the decision I made. I would invest that money in beer.
Fair. It's probably a better investment, if I'm perfectly honest. But
I mean,
you know.
the only problem is that now the Arizona solution will only cost you 1 pint of beer.
Is it still the right decision though? Is one?
It's
pint
still
of
exactly
beer?
the same price. It's just the beer's got more expensive.
Yeah, it's a London pint at $12.99.
That you work your way up to Zygon, you know. You start at the air zone solution, you might work your way through a bit of shakedown, have a little bit of wartime, and then you'll end up at Zygon. You made the right decision.
I watched videos about people like you, John, at school, and it was like, don't say yes to these people.
Me and Uncle Kev, right?
Who knew I was going to get so much mileage out of my Uncle Kev? He gets mentioned on my podcast a lot as well. He's I have to get him on one day. Mark Donaldson, are you a fan of the air zone solution?
So I'm not gonna stick up for the air zone solution because I do think it has its flaws, but I do think it's just right. Essentially, what it is it's Torchwood, but kind of spinning off from 1989 Doctor Who. So it's Torchwood, but shot like the Bill. And it's just as kind of awkwardly sexless as Torchwood. But actually, I think there's at its core is actually quite a fun environmental thriller. The problem is that because they have all the actors that play Doctor Who in it, there's this kind of weird conceit where Peter Davison is this journalist that gets bumped off, and he somehow manages to transfer his consciousness into Colin Baker. And they never explain why that is. And it's just because the audience know that they all played Doctor Who, so I guess they've got a kind of psychic connection, maybe, possibly.
That is the link, unfortunately. That is the link. It's very odd.
That's even
Colin
weirder.
Baker's an upgrade on himself.
That's even weirder than Nicola Bryant going down on Colin Baker.
Okay. Yeah.
One of my favourite moments at the end is there's this huge, big sort of showdown in front of an audience, and John Pertwee, who's sort of playing the equivalent of the curator in it, sort of says goodbye to everybody in a mysterious way and heads off. And instead of going out the exit, he just walks into the gents. It's just like John Pertwee's off for a massive dump, and that's why he's being so mysterious.
There's an edit to be made there, isn't there? Just
probably
noise on the end.
The guys from Devious are probably like busy clipping things out, and you just hear a strange wheezing droning noise coming from the news.
If it was the guys from Devious, they'd still be making it today.
Matt Barber.
Hey.
Matt Barber, have you seen the air zone solution?
I have, and I believe I've talked about it on this very podcast.
Okay, then. So, we won't listen to your opinion on it then.
But I can't remember it. Well, I can't really remember what I thought. But from my memories, I have fairly fond memories that it was slightly better than I was expecting. I think I'd seen bits of it before, but No, I didn't buy beer with the money left over. I probably bought a Doctor Who DVD instead of an Air Zone Solution DVD, Blu-ray video. But I quite liked it. It was good. I quite liked the BBV stuff, but then I quite liked Zygon as well. Apart from the gratuitous Caligula like added sex scenes, the rest of it was quite well made.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, people have probably heard me talk about the Air Zone Solution before if they listen to my podcast, and also I wrote a book on all of those spin-offs. So my thoughts on it are clear. Although,
hang on, you wrote a book. Was it called Downtime? Was it available from Obverse?
It is, yeah. It's called Downtime: The Lost Years of Doctor Who, available from Obverse Books long before there was anything called the Black Archive.
I seem to remember we did mention the video release of the Demons earlier, and I didn't say anything about my Black Archive on the Demons that's still available from the Obverse Books. Well,
you didn't at all. And we're still a good 10 to 12 years away from Rose, which I believe somebody else wrote a Black Archive on.
Yeah. Then there's another 6-7 years on. Then there's the 11th Hour as well.
Well, there we go. Look, I mean, we can't get into every anniversary of Doctor Who and celebrate every year, but I guess to sum up, I just want to know whether people think the 30th anniversary was a successful anniversary. I'll come to Mark Donaldson first.
So at the time, I don't think I would have really picked up on the kind of pomp and circumstance or lack thereof. But actually looking back at it, it is quite incredible that given Doctor Who died in 1989, that actually we got as much stuff as we actually did in 1993. Repeats, charity specials, attempts at making a kind of straight-to-video film, the Air Zone Solution, little postcards you could put in a little wallet, of all the video art, all that stuff. I think looking back at Doctor Who in the 90s, Doctor Who wasn't dead. It was just kind of resting and waiting for the right person to bring it back, who was Russell T Davies. And then obviously Doctor Who in 2021 was just kind of resting and just waiting for the right person to bring it back. And that person was Russell T Davies.
Very well put. Ian Martin, do you think it was a successful anniversary celebration?
I think in the rearview mirror, yes, it was. The show felt dead. The BBC were making sort of disorganized, random attempts at reviving it or keeping it in the public consciousness. It must have got a lot of viewers for Dimension in Time. There were the books available for people who wanted proper new Doctor Who stories. There was the Paradise of Death with Tragan. I think there was enough for anyone who was really missing the show to still feel like it was a thing.
Yeah, I think for a dead show, and I'm thinking of Star Trek in its 50th anniversary year, not really, like there was a film that sort of had a picture of the old crew in, and there was an event in Birmingham, and that was about it. And it just seemed, and that was a big 50th anniversary so as you say, for a show that hasn't been on for a long time, quite a lot was going on. John Arnold, what are your final thoughts?
I think, something Paul Cornell called it's not the wilderness years, because wilderness years implies there's nothing going on. It's kind of, he said, the theme park years, because you've got the new adventures were quite healthy. You're going to launch the missing adventures next year. The Planet of the Daleks repeat was primetime BBC One on a Friday. If they showed a black and white episode of Doctor Who at 7:30 on a Friday night.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on? It's a much healthier situation than we thought it was at the time. At the time, it just seemed like everyone's so obsessed with getting the show back that we were all focusing on that. But there's a lot, you could dig into the past. You could, all the videos, all the books, the fact books as well. Was it Sixth Doctor Who handbook? Those handbooks it was coming out as well. It was a really healthy time. It's kind of when fandom, to me, really formed. That period where you could dig into it. Doctor Who magazine is going back, and it's where they could dig into the archives. All the correspondence, and it's a really kind of healthy time. And I know it might be nostalgic, but yeah, I did enjoy it. And yeah, Dimension in Time, I didn't like it at the time, but now it's fun. I'll even watch the Years Old Solution again after this.
Excellent. And finally, Matt Barber, what are your final thoughts, and was it successful?
I think it was successful because the series needed it kind of put a pause on my desire for a new series for a time, because it was obviously redirecting the series towards nostalgia in the past. And I think, yeah, Dimensions in Time did that a little bit. The video releases did that quite a bit. And then 30th TARDIS kind of sealed the deal with, this is now a series that we're going to enjoy the video releases. So suddenly my attention turned to like video collecting and really sort of looking forward to the next old Doctor Who. And then maybe the New Adventures kind of fed that sort of new stuff that was coming out, but I saw that kind of separate, and that's nothing to do with the anniversary for me, really. It was entirely a kind of a nostalgic affair.
They had the logo. They had the anniversary look on them.
Oh, I think I recognise it as Doctor Who. I just, don't recognise it as being part of that 30th anniversary drive.
But if they brought back the monk for you and you complained.
Well, look, I think we've looked at the 30th anniversary enough. I think we've given it a jolly good seeing to. I'm sure we'll be back after the 60th anniversary to talk about how disappointing that was, and then we can all meet up in 30 years' time and talk about how we didn't know how good we had it. But until then, I've been Dylan.
I've been Ian.
I've been John.
I've been Mark.
And I was with Matt.
And we'll speak again soon. There we go.
Wonderful.
Lovely.
That was a lot of fun. Sorry if I talked over anybody, but it's because I couldn't see you, so that's the excuse I'm making. But,
yeah, there was a bunch of times I was nodding my head, and then I thought, he can't see me nodding my head. But I'm blonde. What do I know?
There was a moment where my internet dropped out and it came back, and you're all moving again, and then you just froze. So I've been looking at frozen pictures of you all for the entire time. In fact, I've just taken a screen cap so you can see the lovely pictures I've got, including Mark sort of doing a Tommy Cooper and Matt Barber asleep.
Excuse me.
And my mic cut out and my Audacity paused for about 10 seconds in the middle, so I'm going to give JR a challenge of trying to line up my audio feed.
Great. Well, he's
this missing episode in the middle.
So even when he's not around, you've got to annoy him.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, I've got the audio of the Skype recording as well, so hopefully he can just put them all into the same file and match them all up.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Right. Well, I'll leave you guys to your evening, but thanks for joining me on this. I just remember, guys, I mentioned doing.
Pleasure as always.
Indeed, I mentioned doing it when I first joined the podcast, so I'm glad that we finally got here. Excellent. All right, you take care, guys. I'll see you soon.
See you tomorrow.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.